Hello, third graders. We finished Freckle Juice last week, and now we are going to read Tornado. Can you see that? Tornado is about a dog, and so this story kind of goes back in time and then back to present time. So this is chapter 1. It's called The Storm. Twister, yelled Pete. There's a Twister. I ran for the house. Twister, he pointed. I looked over my shoulder. I could see it, a long black funnel cloud in the west. It pointed from the dark sky right down to our farm. Pete opened the doors to the storm cellar and beckoned us with his straw hat. Twister, he shouted again. So a twister is a tornado. It's a wind that goes into a cyclone, it swirls around and around, and it's really, really fierce, and it can destroy things and can hurt you if you're outside. So you need to be inside your storm cellar, which is underground. My two brothers ran from the barn. Pete helped my grandmother down the steps. Hurry up, boys, she called. Then she said to my mom, Come on, Beth. My mother was standing outside the door. She was worried about my dad. Link, she called, Link. My dad had been named for the President Lincoln. He's in the cornfield, Pete said. He can't hear you, ma'am. Still my mother hesitated. The cornfield seemed to be directly under the funnel cloud. He'll be all right. He'll get into a ditch. You come on now. She ducked into the cellar and pulled the door shut behind her. The storm cellar was dim and cool. It smelled of potatoes and pickles. My mother kept sacks of root vegetables there, along with boxes of eggs and jars of tomatoes. My brothers and I sat on the dirt floor. My grandmother sat on the pickle barrel and my mother on the orange crate. We sat for a moment silent. We listened to the storm and worried about our dad in the cornfield. Something that sounded like gravel was thrown against the cellar door. Hail, my mom said. Hail is like little balls of ice that come from the sky. And she bowed her head. Pete cleared his throat. You know what this brings to my mind, he said. We knew, and my brothers and I turned to him gratefully. We saw a flash of teeth in and he smiled at us. It brings to mind a dog I had one time. Tornado, my brothers said together. How'd you know his name, he teased. Yes, I did call my dog Tornado. Pete settled in a straw hat on his head and began. I remember it was an August day, a whole lot like this one. So here's a picture. I hope you can see that. It looks like it's the grandpa. He's going to tell the story about his dog, Tornado, and why he calls him that. So chapter 2, in the doghouse. At breakfast that morning, I remember my mom looked out from the stove, took a breath, and said, I smell a storm. I shivered a little bit because my mother's nose was always right. My dad said, well, you kids better stay close to the house. The morning went by, slow and scary. We did stay close to the house. Folks didn't call on our part of the county Tornado Alley for nothing. All about lunch it hit, only there was no warning like we had today, no funnel cloud, no nothing. One minute we were eating beans and biscuits at the table, the next there was a roar, worse than a train, worse than 100 trains. And then there came a terrible tearing sound, like the world was being ripped apart. I can still hear it in my mind. I looked up and I saw the sky. The ceiling was gone. There was sky. The tornado had torn the roof off the kitchen and left the food on the table and us in our seats. My dad was the first to be able to even speak. He said, well, I'm surprised to find myself alive. That was how we all felt. We looked at our arms and our legs to make sure we were all still there and they were all hooked to us. Then my father pushed back from his chair and said, let's go see the damage. Outside, the yard was not our yard anymore. The tree with the tire swing was laid flat. The tops of all the pine trees were snapped off. A doghouse I had never seen before was beside the well. A piece of bicycle was here and a hood of a car there. I stepped over somebody's clothesline that still had the clothes on it. The roof of our kitchen lay at the edge of the garden. It was folded shut like a book, and we walked over. It was about time for a new roof, my dad said. He always tried to find the good in everything. I was just walking around looking at other people's things when I heard a rattling noise. I kept listening and looking, and finally I realized the sound was coming from that doghouse. I went over to it. The dog was trembling. You could see it. He was trembling. It was shaking all over. It was doing everything but having a fit. I looked inside, and there was a big black dog. He was panting so hard. Panting is when they go with their tongues hanging out. And I could feel his breath. He was shaking so hard, and the doghouse was in danger of losing all of its boards. Dad, there's a dog in here. My dad came over. Look, Dad, it's a big black dog. My dad leaned down and took a look. Well, you can come on out now, he told the dog. The storm's over, and you're among friends. The dog just kept shaking. Maybe I could pull him out, I said. Don't you put your hand in there, my mom called. Yes, leave him be, Pete. All that day and all that night and all the next day, the dog just shook. I brought him water and to drink, but he wouldn't. I brought him food, but he still wouldn't eat. Then that night, my mother leaned out the kitchen door and yelled, Supper, as she usually did. And the dog heard her, and he stuck his head out of the doghouse. He must have been a familiar word to him. Here, I'll show you the picture. This is the little boy trying to get him to come out of his doghouse and give him some food, but he's just laying down there. He was probably terrified, poor thing. He came out, stood there, looked around for a moment, then gave one final shake as if he were shaking off the past. Then he came over and joined us at the back door. I said, Dad, can we keep him, please, please? If we don't find his owner, my dad said. Can we call him Tornado? Until we find the owner, said my dad. We'll have to ask around, my mother reminded me. I know. My dad bent down. Let's see what kind of manners you got. Tornado, shake. My dad put out his hand and Tornado put out his paw. They shook like two men striking a bargain, and then we all went in for supper. And that's the end of those chapters. So we're going to start the next chapter 3. We're going to start a card trick. So I also have several copies of this book. If you guys want to come in and get it, you guys can check this one out. And it's called Tornado by Betsy Byers. If you guys wanted to buy it on Amazon too, you could do that as well. And I will see you next week. Have a great week. And remember, the library is open. I am open later this week from 8:30 to about 2. So if you want to come and if you want to make an appointment for later, I will meet you there later as well. So just let me know. I hope you guys have a great week. Bye.